spotlight on a member interview for the Texas Hand Society. I'm Jonathan Lundy, and we are hosting Dr. Miguel Pirela-Cruz. Miguel Pirela-Cruz is a professor of orthopedic surgery at the Paul L. Foster Texas Tech School of Medicine, also holds a teaching position at the University Medical Center there. He's currently the president-elect of the American Association for Hand Surgery. Will take over the reins as president in 2026, and just want to introduce him. He's one of our members of our new society, and was gracious enough to be our inaugural interviewee for this member spotlight, which we're going to try to host once a month. So welcome. Thanks, Dr. Pirela-Cruz.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So just some interview questions that hopefully we can shed some light on your background and maybe what got you on a pathway here to Texas. So to start off, who were some of the key hand surgeons or other mentors who inspired you to go into hand surgery?
There were a few members. Actually, I was a late bloomer. I've always been a late bloomer in my life. But initially, I wasn't even interested in medicine. I was actually interested in medical illustration. And I did actually take a lot of art and privately, but somehow eventually I went into medical school, and I did have a lot of people that influenced me along the way. During my internship, I did it down in New Orleans at the Public Health Hospital, and we had Ray J. Haddad was there. He's a hand surgeon. He was chair of the department at Tulane. And we also had Daniel Reardon, Dr. Reardon, you may know, because he's pretty well known for his work with leprosy, a lot of tendon transfers. He was at Carville in Louisiana. And the hospital that I was at was actually the sister hospital for Carville. So we would see a lot of patients with Hansen's disease. And I just had a big interest in hand surgery at that time. And the biomechanics that he would actually, the way he would present it, just really fascinating. Another person that was down there that was well known in hand surgery is Earl Peacock, and he did a lot of work on tendon repair. So he was certainly influential during my internship. Later on, when I went on to do my fellowship in hand surgery, I did in Philadelphia at the rehab center, and James Hunter was my mentor over there. Hunter and Schneider, they were there. Lee Osterman was also there. He also played a big influence in my career. And there were other staff people like Steve Cash that also really helped formulate and really drove me to solidify my interest in hand surgery. So I had a lot of mentors. Later on, when I moved to, I was on staff at the University of New Mexico. Dr. George Omer, you may know him. He was at Brooke Army for quite some time. Had a large series of nerve injuries from the Vietnam experience. But he was actually my mentor at University of New Mexico, along with Dr. Monim. Monim has done a lot of work, and they both pushed me. I was interested in a lot of wrist kinematics and that sort of thing. And Dr. Omer got me interested in a lot of nerve repairs and that sort of thing. And I helped him with his book and a few other projects along that line. So he really took me away from the wrist kinematics somewhat. He said, "This is good for you, Miguel."
Hang on 1 second. My wife just got home and doesn't know I'm doing this. Hi.
Hello there.
That's my wife, Catherine. That's Stephen. That's Dr. Pirela-Cruz.
How you doing?
This goes in too, right, Steve? This is live. I'm just kidding.
Okay, I'll let you guys get back.
Okay, it's important, got to mix family with your business, because we always
yeah.
That's our key to success, believe it or not. You got to bring the family in all the time. It's very important to do that.
Absolutely.
So those are some key people that really brought me along. Dr. Van Beek was another one. He's over in Minnesota, but he was another person that had influence in my career. So I had a lot of mentors.
Like so many of those names are interesting, especially the background with having some experience with leprosy and Hansen's disease. It's just something we read about nowadays, but in this country, I don't believe we see that much of that anymore.
I may be dating myself, but in medical school, I had Dr. Lockman as one of my teachers.
Okay, okay.
So, and I definitely dated myself because back in undergraduate, I actually had one seminar that Dr. Watson was our professor.
Okay.
So, from Watson and Crick, so it's
Right. That's really interesting. Okay. Got
so
it.
I'm an old dude.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Very interesting. And then Dr. Omer, also with the Army background, at Brooke Army Medical Center, they have the annual, I believe it's the Resident Research Day is Omer Day in his honor. Um,
He's a great man, and he really taught me a lot, and he's very influential in the field of hand surgery, and certainly we call him the granddaddy of the CAQ because
oh yeah.
he's the one that pioneered the CAQ in hand surgery and felt that that was needed then. And of course, that's a challenge, because there were a lot of people that were resisting, another exam and another board. So, but he managed to do that. So,
Right, right. That's interesting. I've read a little bit of that history kind of as we got things going with the Texas Hand Society, some of those things, the background, and that's very interesting. Um, can you give us a little background on how your career path took you to where you are today as a hand surgeon in El Paso, Texas?
well, actually, I told you did my internship down in New Orleans with the Public Health Service, and that was part of my payback with medical school. So I had an obligation with PHS, and then pretty much completed that. And in my last year of my residency, the Air Force approached me, and they asked me to join them, and I said, well, I'll do it under one condition, and that's if my primary AFSC is actually hand surgeon. And they said, we can do that because it's a critical specialty that we need. So I said, fine, we have a deal. So I had a 2-year obligation with the Air Force. And believe it or not, it was 2 years, and then I look up and 35 years have gone by, so it's one of those things. But nevertheless, my path kind of followed my assignments with the Air Force. I did about 6 years or so active duty, and then the rest I did on the reserve side. And so I got a chance to travel around and meet other people and really help my career. So coming out of my fellowship, I was stationed in Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And, the Air Force has the AirVac system where they just bring people in from all over the world. It's not a problem. If you need to travel someplace, the Air Force will get you there. So I had a lot of patients that would just come in, and most of them were pretty much unannounced. The clerk would just call me up and say, Dr. Cruz, we have a couple of AirVacs for you here. I say, okay, ma'am, I'll be up there. And you never know what you're going to get. It's like potluck. So and then so that really helped my career. Helped me focus on just hand surgery and really something I always wanted to do. Just really go at it and not just didn't want to be sidetracked by other things. So and I travel a lot. So I had a chance to be stationed in Kansas, McConnell Air Force Base. I was stationed in Albuquerque, Kirkland Air Force Base. I was stationed in Glendale, in Arizona 3 times, and McGuire was another base that I was at. So I ended up doing a lot of different locations with the Air Force, and pretty much I was able to work it out to still maintain my reserve career and also be a hand surgeon as a civilian throughout that time. So 35 years went by fairly quickly in that regard, and it took me eventually to El Paso, where I was able to work with the Army residents here at William Beaumont, and they actually were part of our program. We had a combined program with civilians and active duty, and so in the orthopedic program. So this is what I spent most of my career in El Paso doing.
Okay, got it. I know a few of the John Dunn and Leah Triolo are just a couple of folks that come to mind.
Yeah, they were my former residents.
Right, right.
Good people.
You've been a mentor too. Dr. Triolo says hello. I talked to
Oh,
her earlier today.
okay.
She's right up the road at Fort Cavazos, and we still communicate quite a bit.
I know she was stationed at Fort Hood for a while, so
Yeah, she's still up the road there. Yes, sir.
okay. And then Mickey Cho is another one that's down there.
Oh yeah,
He was
yeah,
another of my former residents, along with John. John is still here.
yeah. I talked to him this weekend, and he said he had not that long ago. I guess gotten out and he's there practicing
Yes,
in
yes, yes, he is.
um, what was the hand surgery landscape like in El Paso and West Texas when you first began practicing there?
Interestingly, for this size city, I was really surprised that we really did not have a definitive hand group. And that was one thing that I would say it's probably a failure on my part. I tried to convince the dean of the medical school that we should have a hand group to be able to handle all kinds of hand injuries because I was the only person doing replants for almost 20 years in this area.
Wow.
And that was a real struggle for me because certainly when you have one person, at first, we were the only one level one trauma center in El Paso, and we had a 300-mile radius to cover. So that's quite a bit. And then we have Juarez next door, and then things get really crazy over there at times. And a lot of those patients actually seek their medical care over here. So that's a lot. That's a big burden on one person. And certainly, I could easily see a group of 3 or 4 hand surgeons being here, so we can rotate and 24/7 be able to do replants, do micro, do whatever pops up in our doorstep. It wasn't like that, and it still is not like that till this day. But we do have more hand surgeons that are operating with various hospitals, so that kind of helped to diffuse the situation now. And we also have now a couple of other level one trauma centers in the city, so that the trauma is being dispersed a little bit more. Still pretty busy, but it's a lot better than what it used to be.
Got it. Okay. Okay. How long have you been in El Paso now?
Well, I would say more than 20 some odd years.
Okay. Um, so you mentioned some of these. What were some of the unique challenges you faced initially, and then more recently ones you face now practicing in El Paso that you'd feel important for other members of the THS to know about, specifically out there, out west?
Well, I did mention already the micro. The micro, I think, is a problem in many cities, but I think that it is important that we try to spread that burden among various hand surgeons in town. And it's nice when you have a team approach. You can be with another group and still, in competition, but still work together, so to speak, and kind of carry that burden. Over here in El Paso, we are kind of in a unique situation because we do have a lot of immigrants that come through El Paso with various injuries. We see a lot of jumpers off the bridge. That's kind of unique. We see a lot of folks that are trying to escape the Border Patrol and that sort of thing, and they had a lot of injuries. So we have a good number of those. We also have people that are hurt by the coyotes that are being brought over, and it's an ethical question. Are we responsible to take care of them? And the residents would say, hey, what should we do? And I say, well, as a doctor, you have a person that's sick, you got to take care of them. If we weren't, if we are not supposed to take care of them, then they shouldn't let them in the hospital. But if they're in the hospital and they present it to you, you take care of them the best way you know how. Now we can be reasonable in terms of the economics. We can try to be as cost effective as possible in what we do. And that's one of those things that you have to really bear in mind is you have to try to satisfy and take care of the patient, but also try to be reasonable in terms of what you're not going to put a big expensive implant in someone, and you're going to try to, if you can get by with one operation that's going to be reasonable, that has a predictable outcome, you're going to do that too, as opposed to doing a stage procedure, for example, things along those lines. So that's something that's fairly unique in this area. But other cities have the same challenges as well. And we have to kind of figure out the best way to handle this sort of thing. But I just say, when someone's hurt and you have the capability of taking care of them, do it to the best of your ability. That's pretty much the mantra that we've been following in that regard. But it's a county hospital, and we have the the burdens that come with that. The payer mix is always a burden, so we try to be reasonable and try to still keep the hospital afloat. It's the taxpayers that really cover a lot of the burden, so we try to be cognizant of that fact and try to do what we can for the folks in the city.
Got it. Okay. Okay, cool. As you reflect on some of the people you've trained, who has gone on to make a large impact in the field of hand surgery? Any folks come to mind?
Well, a good number of them are still budding, and most of them went through the military. But Mickey had he stands out. He's been really working hard and trying to get the nerve project going with the Axiom and some of those other things. Lear is another one that has really been really bringing people along. And John Dunn was an amazing resident. He put out 60 papers as a resident. He was,
Yeah,
and that was a pretty interesting achievement. And I just say, John, I don't know how you do it, but he was there. He was able to crank those out. He actually had a good background in working with a publishing company when he came into the program. So he really knew how to put projects together fairly quickly and really get them accomplished. That's a special talent, that
yeah,
in being able to do that.
got it. Okay. Um, this may be you may have already hit on some of these, but do you have any anecdotes about hand surgery in Texas you'd like to share?
Well, I think one thing that is interesting is a lot of people don't know what we do as hand surgeons, and some of that is our fault for the confusion, because when you ask, I was on the board, the American board. I'm still, American Board of Orthopedic Surgery. First question I would ask when I would sit down with the candidate is, how do you define hand surgery? Now, Dr. Omers say hand surgery is defined from the tip of the finger to the opposite side of the brain. And obviously, we're not operating on brains. But I limit my scope to from the fingertip to the shoulder. And other hand surgeons would say it's from the elbow down. Some would say from the forearm down. Some would say wrist down. And others would say the right index finger from the PIP joint distally. So, and that leads to a lot of confusion for our patients. So I think, and I think we probably need to define that a little bit more, what a hand surgeon does, and just basically just to try to help them out. But I think that certainly, because each practice is a little unique. Some people are more plastics trained and they tend to concentrate more on the soft tissues, and some of the orthopods like to concentrate more on the bones. So I think we probably need to work on some education. Just say, hey, if it's a hand problem, we'll take care of it, and let us figure it out, and steer the patient in the right direction. I think we can do a little better job in terms of advertising for our own specialty in that regard, educating our patients.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the things you just mentioned there bring to mind some of the things that you and I have talked about recently when it comes to coverage issues and access to care issues, and maybe kind of some of the nebulous ways that hand surgery can be defined in a city or a region.
Well, when I would make up the call schedule for hand and micro in El Paso, we did have those issues. And I had to go back to administration and say, hey, we're in America. And, people like to get paid for the work they do. You just can't expect someone just goodness of their heart to be on 24/7, for doing this sort of thing. So why don't you put together a little budget, and we can pay and incentivize people to take call. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but just give them a little token of appreciation for the work they do for taking call. And once we did that, that really helped handle a lot of the coverage that we had before we had problems filling the slots. And once we did that, people were knocking on the door and saying, hey, I can help you out with some call here. Do you have any time for me? And it was reasonable. It wasn't a lot of money, but yet it just basically told the person taking call, we appreciate what you do. Thank you for helping us. Is a little token of appreciation.
Got it. And then the last question, can you trace your lineage from Dr. Sterling Bennell to you and your training in hand surgery?
Well, that's an interesting question. Dr. Bennell trained Bob Carroll in Columbia Presbyterian, and Bob Carroll trained Dr. Hunter.
Okay.
And Hunter then went to Philadelphia, and then I actually trained with Dr. Hunter. So, that's pretty much. And Hunter was also a colonel in the Army as well.
Okay.
He was stationed at Valley Forge, so there's a military connection there. That because a lot of that came out of the military, World War II. So it's that military connection, right there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that wraps up the questions that we had put together for our initial interview. We really appreciate you giving us some of your time to take away and share your experience and give us an idea about what life is like out there and kind of the path you've carved for not just yourself and your patients, but the people you've mentored out there too. There's a lot of up and comers and some big names out there in the hand surgery world that could look at you as a mentor. So we appreciate your time.
Well, listen, I want to thank you too for all you do for the Texas Hand Society and Association. The one last thing I'd like to point out is that El Paso is not a bad place to be. We've been getting a lot of press in the news, and a lot of focus has been over here. But in actuality, this is one of the safest cities in the United States, and I've traveled all over. And
Yeah.
but a lot of the activity that happens in Juarez, but that stays over there. This
Right.
is a very, very safe city. My kids grew up over here, and I tell you, it's a pretty family friendly kind of place, and you would not get that impression when you look at the news. So it is actually a very, very safe city.
Yeah, we would always have to come out there prior to a military deployment and spend a couple of weeks, and then I rotated as a med student in Beaumont. I loved El Paso.
Well, a lot of people before they go to the sandbox, they get their
Right,
training over here.
right.
I naturally, I was when I went to Afghanistan, I actually was stationed with a group out of Homestead in Florida.
Oh yeah, near Miami.
In Miami, yeah, I was with the Makos over there. It's an F-16 unit, so I went with the pilots over there, and it was a good experience. Just good guys. They really work hard for our country, and they did a lot. So it's just an amazing bunch of folks over there. But yes, El Paso is a staging place for a lot of the soldiers that are actually going into the sandbox. So that's what we find. A lot of them, when they come through the military, they end up saying, "Hey, it's not a bad place to be," and they end up staying in town. So we have a lot
Right.
of military here.
Okay, cool.
Well, thank you
Thanks
very
again.
much. It's been a pleasure.